within me.
Live from Radio Cayman Studio, this is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
A very good morning and warm welcome once again to Money Sense. I'm Simon Cawdery and I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming back Richard Maparura. Richard, it's only seems like it was January that you were last here, but
Yeah.
a few things have happened in that time, which we will come to.
A lot.
Well, that's one way of describing it. A lot, yes. It's been a somewhat longer than normal 3 or 4 months, hasn't it? But before we come to that, we have some people sitting next to you.
Yes.
We do indeed, and for our listeners, we are going through a process where we are hoping to bring on some more guest hosts to this show, so that I can take some vacation. Apparently, that's what it's all about. Me having spare time and doing fun things. So we have a couple of potential future hosts with us today. We have Taka Moshiwa. And we have Eric Fell. And then after the break, we're going to introduce you to a third potential co-host, Revas Nair. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining. And feel free to jump in with any interrogation questions you have of Richard. So, Richard, I said that we've had a few strange months. Last time we chatted, there hadn't been anything happening in Iran, hadn't been anything happening in the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes.
And now, in a sense, there's nothing happening in Iran and nothing happening in the Strait of Hormuz, but there's been a bit of chaos in the meantime. But oil is obviously a topic of key importance to everybody.
It is.
When you look at, I think about Cayman, and we consume oil immensely because almost all of our power comes from diesel, which is oil generated. Most of us drive petrol-driven cars.
Yeah.
So all of our costs of living, whether it be shipping of goods coming in, it's all related to the oil price.
Yes, true.
So what's your view on what's going to happen to the oil price and what that means for Cayman?
Well, I mean, you have already said it right, in terms of, again, thank you for having me back on the show. It's always good to be here. And it's good to have these guys here today with us. Please don't shoot too hard, okay, on hard questions. But no, too excited to be here. Simon, you're right. A lot has happened. When we spoke last time, I think the war in Iran hadn't happened. I think there were threats, there were talks, and we were wondering if the war actually would have happened, what was going to happen, right? So I think we've already seen the shocks in terms of oil prices going up as north of $120 and so forth. We have already started experiencing that. I think for most people, for the greater part of the people in Cayman, especially when you go on the pump, I think if you compare prices from last year to this year, you can already see and feel the difference. And again, everything in Cayman feeds into, we are essentially an import economy. We import everything. So prices are going to be higher on almost every layer when it comes to the biggest component of input, which is oil to everything.
Indeed, I went to the petrol station and filled up my car, and my debit card wouldn't work, which is, I thought, that's because I've spent too much money. Fortunately, I meant someone else had to pay, which got me a free tank of gas, which is excellent news. But you're right. But in Cayman, we see it more obviously perhaps than some other countries.
Yes.
But what in terms of oil, when you look at the world, the US is actually a net exporter of oil.
Yeah. Yes.
And so not all countries suffer in quite the same way. The US is actually, in many respects, doing quite well, inverted commas, out of this, because it's got a lot of oil producers, got a lot of oil exports, which creates a lot of FX that people are buying a lot of US products. So when you look around the world, who's doing better than others and who's doing worse than others?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. So we have to understand in this case, of course, if you look at anyone who is a net exporter, might seemingly be benefiting because the price works in their favor. So if the price is going up and you're selling, then you probably stand to benefit. But I think looking at two of the global powers, the US and China, I think they are exactly in two opposites. Okay, so the US is a net exporter, but China is actually a net importer. Okay, so when you look at it from that dynamic, you would think, okay, China maybe is at a disadvantage because they have to be buying at these high prices. But I think looking at it from a bigger picture, I think you want to take cognizance that greater part of Europe is also net importers, Japan, India, and so these places are going to certainly feel it much more than other places where we actually net exporters. So the US exports, the greater part of Gulf exports, Russia, of course, exports as well.
And I guess one could draw the parallel to what's going on in certain markets. So US stock market's doing okay.
Yeah.
And partly that's because a lot of the US stock market profitability is doing, leaving AI aside, which is always a different topic, but a lot of the US stock market companies are doing really quite well because of this. But how long though, politics is a difficult game to predict, but how long do you think a prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz and this oil price shock, how long can we survive it in a sense of before it becomes really sort of recessionary and cost inflation problems?
Yeah, no, I think timing on that is a key component. So the longer it procrastinates and the longer it delays, there's a concept that says if we stay above $100 on oil for, let's say, more than 3-6 months, then things will start to break. Okay, so I think at this point in time, we're at a place where we really need things to calm down. Thankfully, they seem to be every day. There's one good news or whatever pointing to either we are going to have, a ceasefire of some sort or something. But again, if you see how the market is pricing this thing, the spot prices are obviously very reactionary, so you always see the spikes on the spot prices, but the forward prices are suggesting that maybe this thing will settle down. So hopefully it won't prolong until we actually realize the anticipation of that prices will normalize a little bit, so it come down below 100.
And then when I look at Cayman particularly, one of the things that we often see about Cayman is that we sort of lag what goes on in the rest of the world a little bit.
Right.
So oil prices go up, things don't matter. It doesn't matter in Cayman for a few weeks, perhaps a month or two, because we have storage of stuff, things already imported at a previous cost. But it won't be long. And as you say, gas prices did go up, but things like CUC prices, they're going to start going up because the cost of diesel is going up, albeit the government has eliminated fuel duty.
They have, yeah.
But a fuel duty, given the oil prices almost doubled over a relatively short period of time, that's still that's not going to be sufficient to enable people to see constant fuel prices. They're still going to see higher costs, aren't they?
That's true. I mean, it's not going to help. I think this summer we're going to get one of the hottest summers in Cayman. So again, I think Mr. Richard Yu and his team at CUC, hopefully they can work some magic to make sure that the bills don't go up. But naturally, yes, it will filter through and people will start to feel it. The whole idea really is that when you have to pay these non-discretionary expenses like electricity, like you don't really have a choice, right, not to live with electricity. So what then it trickles in, it starts eating on your disposable income. Now you have to make a decision on what you now have left to say, well, how do I spend it? And that's how then these things starts to affect the economy essentially.
So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that when you look at the Cayman economy, the oil price is going to hurt consumers, but the actual impact to it will actually be some of perhaps the shops, the restaurants, the bars,
100%.
because that's where the discretionary spending is. So when you think when people listen to go, oh, my small business, I don't really consume a lot of oil,
Right.
I don't really consume, but other people do, and if their discretionary income is reduced, they may not be able to afford to go to your store, your shop, and that could be a real problem for the
That's the real
economy.
problem. That's the real problem. Yes, I think you've put it right.
Well, thank you for that. Any questions, gentlemen, on oil prices for Mr. Richard here? Anything you want to grill him on before otherwise we can move on to another topic? Any questions? No, you're
Enough about oil.
okay. Well, inflation though is linked.
Right.
What's your path or your view of path for inflation?
Yeah, so again, if you think about it, inflation can be driven, either it's a cost push, right? So if it is a cost push, it's whatever is coming in might be forcing things to go up, and then obviously the buyers have to buy more because now the products are expensive. So oil has a direct input to inflation, and that's the biggest problem I think we're having right now. So if you look at, I know people are saying, okay, well, markets are going up. We have a concern in terms of, where oil is going to go and where inflation is going to go. But coming back to the inflation point, it's a natural concept that when you have a higher oil, because it is an input component to a lot of things that then produces products. Yes, certainly there's a connection there, and which is not a favorable connection.
And you mentioned something. I'm an economist by training. Love it when you talk about cost push inflation. It takes me back to my A-level economics and exactly all the textbooks. But maybe let's just explain. There are generally two types of inflation. You've got the cost push and you've got the demand pull.
Yes.
One is often by economists considered much more troubling than another, and partly that's because when you have cost push inflation, you see prices going up. So central banks sort of say, well, our job is to keep prices down, but prices are going up not because demand's doing so well.
Right. Yes.
Prices are going up because costs.
The cost is going up.
So what does that mean then for central banks, and what generally do central banks do about this? Because historically, we've seen some instances during, what was it, the 1970s, the oil price shock, which caused recessions and chaos in a number of countries.
Yeah.
So, what's your view on where that leads central banks to then?
No, I think it puts them in a very difficult position, right? Because I think right now, again, that's where they're trying to analyze and see, is this something that is transitory, which is a word that they are very scared to use now, and we wouldn't advise them to be using it. I think
they used that a few years ago, and they got into a little bit of trouble.
It didn't turn out to be a very good thing. Yeah? So I think the most important thing is really to just look at it and say, okay, like I think you put it right. So if costs are going up, or if inflation is going up because costs are going up, if you then increase rates to sort of like, curve that out, you're already punishing a consumer that does not have capacity. So instead of having a demand push where the consumer is saying, I have capacity, I want to buy more, and you're saying, okay, we're going to try to punish you or make things a little bit expensive by increasing rates so that you don't buy much. So the model there, sometimes that's where we say the instruments of the central banks are not really, in most cases, they are not all at times mostly useful sometimes.
You're talking heresy to someone who studied economics there. Goodness me.
I don't want to lose my job. I work for a bank.
Heretic, goodness me. No, so let me sort of take the other side of that in a sense, because if you're a central banker and you sort of hear people say, well, it's a cost-push inflationary world, prices are going up because of costs, it's not because the economy is doing great.
Right.
Please don't raise interest rates. Central bank goes, okay, but the but here is that people's expectations are, okay, costs are going up, therefore I must demand higher salaries, I must demand higher wages. There's an expectation that inflation becomes continuously higher.
Yes.
And central bankers are rightly terrified of inflation expectations, because if you have high expectations, it often becomes self-fulfilling.
It becomes anchored, right?
Yeah.
It becomes a reality. Yeah, you're right.
So how does a central banker then address that? Because you can't allow people to think it's natural to expect a 5% salary rise each year, because if they do, you will automatically get 5% inflation almost each year, because prices have to go up, demand has to equal supply.
No, I think that's exactly, it comes back to the same point. It puts them in a very difficult position, and that's why, again, we're joking about it, but it's actually the reality. They now have to look at the cost push components to say, are they things that we think are going to be permanent? Because if they are permanent, then yes, the demand is going to be there from the consumers or from the working population to say we need more salaries. But if these things are knee-jerk spikes, maybe they have to wait and see if this thing can spike up and come back, and then they go away. And that's the hope, that these things might normally just be very temporary.
I guess, sort of bringing it back a little bit to Cayman, if we see a resolution in the Middle East, oil starting to flow more freely, prices come down, perhaps by the end of the year, we might actually see gas prices at the pump below $6 again, below $5.30 or something like that, because it shouldn't be a permanent spike in that sense, should it?
Right.
If this is resolved, it is it is a blockage in literally a blockage in a strait.
A physical blockage. Yeah.
So once you relieve that, there aren't other huge cost pressures at the moment out there. I mean, supply chains have mostly recovered after the COVID shock that caused it.
True.
There is a degree, well, we'll probably end up talking about tariffs again and what that does to the world.
Yeah, let's not go there. But there's been some infrastructure damage, which is something we cannot ignore. But to your point, once everything goes back in quotes to normal, or at least if the blockage opens, I think that's going to relieve a lot of things. And again, most of the pricing that happens, it's usually future pricing. So it's usually looking at these spikes we are seeing. It's because the spot price is trying to say what is happening right now. So if the strait opens, right, the spot price should start saying, okay, what is happening right now? It means it has opened. That's why we see these drawdowns every day, 10% moves up and down on the spot price of the oil, right? So yeah, if it opens, things will suddenly start getting in the right direction.
I guess what it does, we'll take a break, I think, very shortly, but I think what it does, if you think about it strategically for any country, the US is in a fortunate position of being a net exporter, as you say.
Right.
Some other countries are as well. But oil always seems to be a geopolitical flashpoint. It always seems to be something that causes tension. So strategically, and you think of Cayman, we import so much oil for our usage. It must hopefully accelerate the path towards building out other forms of energy, because
It should.
otherwise we are a taker on the world stage and forced to live in the world that other people create for us.
No, 100%. 100%. I think I was reading something that
So
says
we need the regulator to permission some solar.
a
stuff,
lot of
because
solar.
that
Because
seems
I think we have less than 5% on alternatives in Cayman, which they shouldn't quote me on that one, but I think it's a very low number. So yes, certainly we need to start thinking broadly on other alternatives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because then we become we choose how we operate as a country as opposed to being forced
Yeah.
to take what's
Taking orders.
going on in the world.
Yeah.
Well, look, I will take a short break there, and but do rejoin us straight after the break.
We give you honor and praise, adoration and glory.
Radio Cayman.
Praise time.
Come and let's praise the Lord. Come and let's praise the Lord. Praise Him in the morning and in the evening. Oh, let's praise the Lord.
Praise time in the morning.
Weekdays 6 to 6:30 a.m.
Radio Cayman, waking you up.
Rock my soul in the blues of my favorite. Rock my soul in the blues of my favorite.
Praise time.
I know He cares. He'll always be there. Oh, yeah. Praise Him, praise Him, praise Him.
Praise time.
Set your clock for 6 a.m. or you will miss it. This is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back to Money Sense and our conversation with Richard Maparura, CEO at Royal Fidelity Bank and Trust. It's a second time I've ever called you that, and it's a relatively new position still for you, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Still enjoying yourself?
still enjoying myself. Thank you.
Good stuff. Good.
We are no longer called Royal Fidelity.
Oh,
We're
aren't you?
just now called RF.
Oh, goodness me.
yeah.
I've
I want to
made
make sure my marketing won't be on
dear.
my case.
Well, yeah, I'll probably get an email from somebody now, won't I? Goodness gracious. Look, just before the break, we were talking about inflation. We're talking about partly because of oil. One of the hot topics, and I think Taka wants to sort of come in on this topic, is AI. Data centers are a huge consumer of electricity, etc., etc. So Taka, why don't you give your good grilling to Richard? What topic would you like him to talk about?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Simon, and welcome, Richard.
Yeah, no, thanks.
So I'll just give a brief overview, of what I want to talk about with respect to AI.
Mm-hmm.
So we've seen, AI meaning artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
We've seen a surge in the uptake of AI, especially in the Western markets or maybe America.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that,
China is doing well as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without us often knowing about it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because I was looking at the R&D expenditure. China is actually higher than the US for AI.
for AI.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
yeah,
So it's come with its own, I'll say, downside. We've seen the numbers start to tick up of layoffs that are attributed to AI. So just to give a little bit of perspective, in 2023, there was 3,900 job losses, or the first time that they reported losses of jobs due to AI. And that number went up to 4,600 in 2024. In 2025, it jumped to 55,000 in the US. And at that point, it was 30% of all tech layoffs contributed by AI. And as of 2026, the number stands at 130,000. And in most of the earnings announcement, some of the
right.
Magnificent Seven,
Yes,
they actually do cite AI as the reason
as
for
the
them.
reason for layoffs. Yeah,
Yes.
I think Coinbase just came out yesterday with a 14% layoff, and they're point blank. It's because of AI.
AI and
so you're right.
automation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now looking at these trends, right? Like, if you look at it like in the employment sense,
Yes.
130,000 over billions,
Yes.
it's still low,
Yes.
but the trend is a little bit worrying.
Right.
What would you advise employees or workers, to do to embrace
Embrace what's coming.
Yeah. And remain relevant?
Yeah.
Most people would view maybe AI like it's coming to take their jobs.
Yeah.
But no, what would you say to reassure them or to make them like partners?
Well, they need to watch the Terminator movies. It's not just coming for your jobs.
No, I think you raise a very good point, and thank you again for all the sort of like background statistics. I think they are very important. One point I want to make that's key to my heart when it comes to AI is for people to understand that we are going to have a replacement or sort of like two competing things. We are going to have productivity as a big issue. So AI is definitely going to help productivity-wise. But that productivity good component is going to compete with sort of like, to the point we're talking about with Simon about consumers, it's going to compete with the purchasing power of individuals, because to your point, some are going to lose their jobs. So you're going to have productivity going up, companies now making products quicker, but to sell them to who? To the guy who has lost his job. Okay, so there's definitely going to be that competition, I think, as we get into this new space of fully establishing and seeing the benefits of what AI can bring to the table. To your point, in terms of us as individuals, how can we embrace this whole thing? I think the theme that has been going out all over is that we have to embrace AI. You cannot run away from it. It's not your worst enemy. You have to appreciate that, number one, it can help you, let's say, as an individual, if you're working, right? So what should people do? People should understand that AI can help them, or it can enhance their abilities. Yeah. So we need to embrace it. We need to make sure that we are working along it. We are actually appreciating what it can do. We are not running away from it because, like, it's not the Terminator. Okay. Yeah. We have to embrace it and learn along and make use of its advantages as we add value to our organizations. Otherwise, we'll be left behind.
One of the challenges I think that people think of with AI is one of the philosophical challenges that people have in the world today is this so-called K-shaped economy, where those people who are doing well are on this upward trajectory. Those people who are somewhat more struggling are actually on a downward trajectory in terms of their future prosperity and future prospects. And in a sense, AI risks widening that gap, because if you have the skills, the resources, etc., you can be a successful person from AI. So you can become a wealthier person, and we see economists again, Gini coefficients of dispersion of wealth increasing. So it's much more difficult to become a wealthy person or successful person if you started out as a poor person. Didn't used to always be the case, but that ladder is becoming much more difficult to climb. So societally, that's a real challenge, isn't it, for everything?
Yeah, you definitely do bring up an important point. So do you think maybe governments will have to somehow be involved in trying to redistribute the wealth that's being created because of AI? Like, entrepreneurs, they're definitely reaping huge rewards because profits are going higher.
Yes.
And there's high-skilled workers who are better positioned to take advantage of the AI.
Yeah.
We have investors in the stock market. The stock indices are going up because of the AI disruption. The other day, I was reading the newspaper headlines. There was a bankrupt shoe company that rebranded itself as an AI.
Yes.
And in one day, the stock price went up by 700%.
700%. That was,
So there's definitely like households that are better off because of this. Unfortunately, these high-income households, they don't have high propensity to spend.
Right.
So once you've spent your first billion, it's difficult to think what you spend the second billion on. Is that what we're...
But you bring in government, and I think there's room for that. I think there's room for governments to consider, the impact and how they can help, individuals and communities. To Simon's point in terms of the K-shaped economy. So I'll give you an example. I think a week ago or so, China came out, and this is from the government. Of course, it's a different type of a government, but they came out and they said no company is going to fire individuals on the basis of AI. Okay, if you have to replace an individual because AI has taken over their job, you have to reallocate them to somewhere. So already that you can see it's a classical example of a $1.4 billion, not billion dollar, 1.4 billion people country that is already instituting something that's significant for AI. So there will be room to protect incomes, to save families, and also to help them embrace the whole thing. So yes, governments can actually play a part.
But I think also to your point, Taka, what we are seeing in a lot of countries around the world is in the political system, we're seeing countries or voters react nervously and elect people that say the right sort of things and say we'll protect your jobs, but actually often are doing the opposite or don't have the capacity, because there is not an easy solution to this problem. But we are seeing an increasing tendency towards fringe parties because people are nervous about those sorts of concerns and go, well, the mainstream political system doesn't seem to be working for us, so therefore we'll try the weird and the wacky and the wonderful. It's certainly going on, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very true.
Richard, counter question for you.
Yeah.
We've seen post-COVID, there was a surge in hiring.
Yes.
A lot of these companies in the US had a lot of expansion post-COVID.
Yes.
And now you're seeing these cutbacks and, supposedly due to AI. Do you think that that's just an easy narrative to sell to the reasons why you're cutting back on your staff count, whereas it's really just because you've overhired and you're just trying to cut back. And efficiencies there. Is that an
I think honestly that could be a valid argument, to be honest. I don't have any statistics on it, but I think you raise a good point. We all know that there was an sort of like an excess hiring. Just after COVID. It's now like a cleaning up process that's happening now, but it needs a narrative to go in front of it. And maybe AI, in this case, maybe it's being used as like a scapegoat, right? But I think to a greater part, I think I have had conversations. So last 3 weeks or so, we had Game Ops here in Cayman. We had a guy who was a senior guy from Coinbase, and just talking to them and hearing them talk and how they are sort of like, streamlining their processes from an AI perspective. And me seeing a headline 2 days ago saying 14% of the people have been laid off because of AI, I get stuck in what to believe. Okay, I'm thinking maybe they are saying the right things or maybe they are not lying to us. But I think I would take maybe that with a pinch of salt and say half of the layoffs maybe are just a cleanup process and the rest is maybe AI.
But all through history, we've introduced new technologies as humanity, and it's led to thousands, tens of thousands of people losing their jobs in what those technologies have replaced. But those people have found new jobs.
They find something else, yes.
Whether that be when computers came along, everyone, that's going to take away everyone's. And some of us are old enough to remember when computers came in. Not you, Richard, way too young and such like. But it's been a concern all through history. So I think you've got to be. We often humans are very good at overreacting to both economic, political, all sorts of scenarios. We often overshoot in terms of we panic and then we get overly depressed. We don't it's very difficult to somehow stick on the middle ground and go, just it will be all right. It's quite a difficult human psyche to think about. You always assume it's going to be terrible. But I think, and I'm going to, my mum won't thank me for this, but that's fine. People who are nervous about AI or not so much nervous about AI, but who haven't used it, one of the things you need to do to make yourself relevant is just to use it. Is just to start playing around with it. I know so many people still, and this is where my mum comes in, who have never tried. And that's really not a good thing, because you want to try to you may not use it very much, but at least try to use it in some small shape or form to see how it can make your day even so slightly better or easier or quicker or save you some chores or some other problems. So I think people just need to go out there and experience it and then figure out how they can be successful with it, not be replaced by it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because if it's going to do 40% of the job, you use your creativity to make the other 60% better and add more value. So instead of seeing AI as coming to replace your job, you actually be promoted for adding value to the company.
There we go. There we go. Although I'm not sure my mum's working as such in that sense. Enjoying her retirement.
Yeah.
Coffees, glasses of wine. That's no, I'm digressing. Digressing. Actually, in fact, I'm digressing so far that we actually are coming to the end of the show. Richard, it's been a real pleasure having you on the show again. Thank you for taking the time. I've also got to thank our potential future, hopefully, guests, hosts of the show, Taka Moshiwa. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Eric Fell and Revas Nair. Hopefully you've enjoyed your experience with us this morning, and we might see you hosting or co-hosting the show in the not too distant future, and bringing along some great conversation as we've had this morning. So thank you, Richard, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
For those of you listening, if you wish to catch up with the show or you want to share the show, it's on YouTube and it will be posted around on social media in the not too distant future. If you have any topic you want us to cover on the show, then don't hesitate to get in contact with us. We have an email address which is moneysense@cfakman.ky. You can send us in a topic and say, hey, wouldn't it be great if you covered this? I'd like to suggest you interview this person. Be delighted to reach out to those people and talk about it on the show. So with that, simply remains for me to say thank you for joining us and tuning in, and look forward to having you join us again in 2 weeks' time.
Radio Cayman.